Hey the YouTube, is your boy Lipit out here with another reaction video. Today we got History's Worst Software Error by Kyle Hill. Let's get right into it, shall we? Hit it.
Katie Yarborough woke up on a warm, clear June day in 1985 and prepared for her 12th cancer treatment. The 61-year-old manicurist got dressed and drove herself to the Kennestone Regional Oncology Center in Marietta, Georgia, where a state-of-the-art linear accelerator called the THERAC 25 would direct high-energy electrons and/or X-rays into her lymph nodes, as it had done for patients in the area thousands of times before. The THERAC would need only a few seconds to painlessly deliver around 200 rads to her upper left chest. But that day, something went wrong. Yarborough felt a red-hot sensation instead of nothing. "You burned me," she told the technician, who quickly assured her that this wasn't possible. Over the next few weeks, she would need one breast fully removed, and her left arm would become completely paralyzed. But her useless arm didn't stop her from living her life, or from driving. She died 5 years later when her car was struck by a truck on a Georgia highway. Katie Yarborough was the first victim of what would be later called some of the worst software-caused accidents in history. This is the true story of the THERAC 25.
That is ominous as hell. Because having radiation itself already terrifies me in the sense that, it is something that is damaging your cellular makeup. It is affecting your, the data that's mapped into your DNA. That is something that's inherently terrifying because it is an existential threat, basically. That's something that you don't really like thinking about a lot.
How do you treat an insidious and deep-seated disease like cancer and its many forms without invasive and dangerous surgeries? One answer, in use for over 100 years now, is radiation, or radiotherapy. The concept is simpler than its name suggests.
You just aim for where the rapidly dividing cells are, and then you give a high dose of radiation, and those cells die. They eventually nuke themselves.
Radiation, in the form of high-energy particles and photons, can ionize or otherwise change atoms and molecules. In a sensitive structure like DNA, enough of this damage can lead to the death of a cell.
Yeah.
A disease like cancer progresses through the unchecked division of cells, so why not try blasting these mutants with radiation that can, by its very nature, pass invisibly through body tissue? What began in earnest only after World War II and the first nuclear reactors is now a highly sophisticated field that uses three-dimensional body imaging and targeted beams of radiation from linear particle accelerators to prevent, halt, and otherwise destroy cancer cells.
Okay.
In the best cases, radiotherapy is considered an effective weapon in 4 out of 10 cancers. No scalpel required. In 1976, AECL Medical, a division of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, developed a revolutionary double-pass accelerator, which streamlined linear accelerator designs by using electromagnets to send beams through a target twice instead of once.
Okay.
The THERAC 25 was one such double-pass machine, 7 feet high and 12 feet wide, smaller than previous accelerators. Also unlike the accelerators of old, the THERAC 25 was run principally by software instead of hardware, lines of code instead of interdependent physical mechanisms. In 1983, AECL performed a safety analysis on the new machine and started selling the THERAC 25 to excited customers. This state-of-the-art device was in high demand. However, left out of that 1983 analysis was any interrogation of the software that ran these complicated devices, of the code based on the older THERAC 20 model and written by a single person, a coding hobbyist, who left the company in 1986.
That is the most convoluted way of putting it, as so you created this extremely complicated device. So what's your software team? One person. Who wrote the software? He left. It's just, oh no, this is a recipe for disaster if I'm seeing it. Oh no.
He remains unidentified to this day.
So they don't even know who wrote the software? Damn. But whoever it was is sitting back down, looking back, saying, yeah, I fucked up, but you know what? I'm just never going to say that I did. And then just pretends to live their lives. I mean, this is, what, decades ago, right? So fair enough.
2 weeks after Katie Yarborough told her technician that she felt a burning sensation during her cancer treatment, there was a red mark the size of a dime on her chest. And directly opposite that mark, a larger disc on her back. Tim Still, the medical physicist at Kennestone, examined her. "That looks like the exit dose made by an electron beam," he said.
Well, yes.
It looked nothing like what could be created by her prescribed 200 rad dose. The physicist later estimated what actually hit Yarborough was closer to 20,000 rads, hundreds of times more than what you'd receive standing inside a failed reactor at Fukushima Daiichi. But Dr. Still wasn't able to recreate a beam of that strength with the machine himself, so he contacted a professional organization to tell them what had happened. He quickly got a call from the AECL in response, telling him to stop making these claims without any proof. They assured him that such an overdose simply wasn't possible.
Anytime a company is, I think it's not just a company, it's just generally in life, when you come into a situation which can't be easily explained, and you ask someone the answer, and their answer is, it's simply not possible. Generally speaking, there's one of two reasons why they're telling you that. Either A, they know it's possible, and they're just maliciously trying to hide something, or B, they themselves don't know it's possible, which in this case is just as terrifying, because they can't even wrap themselves around the idea, the possibility of it happening. Fair enough. Or option 3, you're in the wrong. Fair enough. But more likely, if you're sure it happened, it's either options A and B. So pick one.
Over the next few weeks, the dime-sized red circle on Yarborough's chest became a hole.
Jeez.
Skin grafts failed, as any new tissue simply rotted away.
Jeez.
Her left breast, recently cancer-free, had to be entirely removed.
Necrosis and dying, right?
Her left arm was now immobile. Many sources report it was though a slow-motion gunshot wound had gone through her chest and out of her back.
Jesus.
Yarborough would hire a lawyer and sue the hospital and AECL in the October of 1985.
And I think the problem is, knowing how she died, I think it probably is the question of, would the lawsuit still continue if the person who's putting the lawsuit up died before the lawsuit could go to completion?
But she wouldn't live to find out the reason why nanoscopic bullets had done this to her. 7 weeks later, concerningly similar to Katie Yarborough, a 40-year-old woman with cervical cancer arrived for her most recent THERAC 25 treatment at the Hamilton Regional Cancer Center in Ontario, Canada. She, too, was hit with a slow-motion bullet, complaining of tingling electric shocks during treatment. It would be later estimated that what the THERAC operator had mistakenly irradiated her hip with several times was a total of 17,000 rads, a larger dose than what Harry Doglian Jr. or Louis Slotin received
from the Demon Corps, right? Yeah. Not Dragon Corps.
The AECL was informed immediately and had an engineer dispatched to examine the unit.
I think this is important for them because I think even the manufacturing company would be like, once probably is like a miscommunication or an error, twice is concerning. Like, happening once, fine. Well, it's not fine because it's the people's lives you're playing with, fair. But it could just be a one-off, randomly. But having it twice, nope, that's a problem. Third,
the
just confirms it.
microswitches that controlled the position of the unit's turntable were deemed faulty, and a software change to constantly check the turntable position was introduced. AECL would later claim in a September letter to customers that this change had increased the safety of the THERAC 25 by 5 orders of magnitude.
Okay.
But the cervical cancer patient died a month before this pronouncement, on November 3rd. Her official cause of death was her cervical cancer, though an autopsy revealed that if she had lived, her hip, obliterated by high-energy radiation, would have to have been entirely replaced. 5 days later, a letter from the Canadian Radiation Protection Bureau begged AECL for hardware failsafes and additional software changes.
To be fair, that's respect. At least the regulatory body realized that, this is more than just a company saying it's not possible. It has happened and will continue to happen unless there is a hardware security system in place, basically to prevent software-based errors from coming up. Because you can only do so much with software. Software errors are way too common for it to just be, non-rudimentary or fail-safe. If software was perfect, then cybersecurity wouldn't exist. No. Software is I won't say software is inherently failure-prone. I think software is inherently Any software you release is inherently impossible to test to completion, that there is no possible exploit that will ever be discovered. So I think the possibility of an error creeping in is always there, which is why you need hardware-based checks.
But nothing came.
Which is, I mean, because at least if there's a hardware-based check, it's like, okay, the software fails, the hardware stops it from happening, throws up an error, and then just resets. At least then you're at least protecting people.
Just a month after the heavily irradiated cervical cancer
Bro,
patient
you're
died,
going from 7 weeks to a month, brother.
it happened again. A THERAC 25 unit at the Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital in Washington State, supposed to be now 9 million % safer, hit another cervical cancer patient in the hip with more radiation than what Cecil Kelly endured when a whirlpool of plutonium went prompt critical in his face.
Wow.
Thankfully, the woman ultimately suffered only minor disability and scarring. The more impactful outcome was that doctors and THERAC 25 operators in the US and Canada were now talking to each other.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because I think when they realized 3 incidents over the course of less than 3 months, yeah.
Something was going
Horribly
on
wrong.
that the AECL obviously wasn't addressing or didn't care to. 2 months later, AECL declared that, after careful consideration, we're of the opinion that this damage could not have been produced by a malfunction of the THERAC 25 or by any operator
So they're just
error.
blaming the patient at this point. It's just not our fault. Oh, jeez.
End quote. However, over the next 12 months, THERAC 25 malfunction and operator error would kill 3 cancer patients.
Jeez. Malfunction.
The THERAC
54.
25 software likely had around 100,000 lines of code. Small by today's standards, but complicated nonetheless.
And all coded by a coding specialist by one person?
And error
I
prone.
imagine.
Operators would later testify that they encountered as many as 4 serious error messages a day. Many of those errors would simply read malfunction with a number from 1 to 64.
Okay.
These numbers were not explained, not by AECL, not in any manual. Operators also admitted that they became accustomed to this ambiguity rather than fearful of it. They could and did simply press P to proceed without knowing whether or not an error code was benign or potentially deadly.
Yeah, that is...
It was part of the job to keep an expensive and sought-after machine like the THERAC running. Malfunction 54, one of these mysterious, undefined errors, would turn out to be the one you couldn't skip past. But it would take 3 catastrophes before anyone figured out what they were allowing to happen.
Oh. I mean, it was only a matter of time. It's like you're throwing at least the system is smart enough to throw out the error. It's like, wait, there is a malfunction here. But it doesn't explain what the malfunction is. And then operators just like keep proceeding. And then it eventually hits one of those errors, which it shouldn't be telling you to proceed at all.
Voyne Ray Cox lay beneath the THERAC 25 unit at the East Texas Cancer Center in Tyler, Texas, for his 9th cancer treatment. A technician set his dose at 180 rads.
Okay.
Then she noticed a mistake. She had selected X for X-ray instead of E for electron beam.
Okay.
She quickly moved the cursor, made the change, and activated the machine. Malfunction 54. Used to this by now, she hit proceed anyway. Mr. Cox then felt a powerful shock. According to reporting done by Barbara Wade Rose, Cox tried to get up, but because the intercom for the room just happened to be broken that day, the technician didn't see him struggling or hear him screaming. So she hit him again.
That is...
Another shock ripped through Mr. Cox.
That is a horror story.
The technician only stopped when she heard Cox slamming the door she was behind with his fists. He was examined by physicians and sent home, told to return if anything changed. A few weeks later, he returned to the hospital, spitting up blood. After the accident, no one can reproduce Malfunction 54. AECL told the hospital that an overdose was impossible, suggesting maybe it was indeed an electric shock.
You're doing it
that
4
produced the
times to 5
sensation
times
Mr.
to 7
Cox
people
felt,
dead?
but
That's not an error.
ruled that out too. The company claimed it knew of no other similar accidents.
Really?
So the use of the THERAC unit resumed 17 days later. Voyne Ray Cox died the following August after receiving a calculated dose higher than the worst dose a liquidator would receive when the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded just a month later.
Jeez.
Only 4 days after the THERAC at the East Texas Cancer Center was back online, 66-year-old bus driver Verdun Kidd walked through the lobby on the way to his scheduled treatment. He was to have a THERAC 25 aimed at the skin cancer on his face.
Oh, God.
Malfunction 54. Treatment proceeded. A loud noise brought the technician back into the room to find Mr. Kidd writhing in pain, confused. He said it had felt like something hit him on the side of the face. He saw a flash of light, heard an intense, sizzling sound. The THERAC 25 unit at the center was shut down until the cause could be determined.
I'd say that's a good call.
Verdun Kidd died a month later from radiation-induced damage to his brain and brainstem. His death, 4 months before the death of Voyne Ray Cox, was the first recorded fatality from radiation treatment in medical history.
And that's incredible. That's the first recorded radiation therapy death. As like all the other deaths before it had like very similar causes, but this is the first one that they could definitively prove it's from the device, affects his brainstem. He had no other like brain abnormality. That's what nearly knocked him out, and that's what nearly killed him. Then that is terrifying.
The THERAC technician on site that day and physicist Dr. Fritz Hager stayed the weekend after the Kidd accident, attempting to recreate Malfunction 54.
So he knows the malfunction.
The malfunction that AECL said wasn't possible.
Okay.
They changed the machine's modes, moved the cursor quickly up and down, and typed in different treatment instructions for hours upon hours, and then suddenly, they did it. Dr. Hager telephoned AECL immediately. The FDA, already investigating the accidents, declared the THERAC 25 defective and demanded a corrective action plan, or CAP, from the company. A letter soon went out from the AECL to all THERAC 25 users. Quote, effective immediately, and until further notice, the key used for moving the cursor back through the prescription sequence must not be used for editing or any other purpose. End quote. It was something that everyone had missed, and it was finally going to be fixed. But even after everyone knew what Malfunction 54 was and how to fix it, the accidents continued.
How?
You don't think of software as something being able to fail.
Oh, no. Software fails quite often. There's not even a question of like whether or not software fails. Software fails all the goddamn time. It just so happens that it's easy to keep resetting and keep, rerunning the code until it works more than often than not.
Code is in a computer. Yeah. How could it bend like a steel beam or break like a pane of glass? But like any machine, there's a difference between how it's supposed to be used in theory and how it's actually used in practice. The THERAC 25 used magnets to filter and control powerful beams of radiation. Magnets that, after an input was received, physically took 8 seconds to move everything into position. Fine in theory. What Dr. Hager had figured out was that if an operator set radiation levels and then made a change to those levels within the 8 seconds it took for the magnets to move, the change was not detected. The magnets were already in motion. This could and did allow powerful, unfiltered beams of radiation to strike patients. This animation, reproduced in Spanish, shows the sequence of events needed to produce Malfunction 54. In theory, an operator would make a change.
Oh, that is interesting. So you would type in all the code, you'd go all the way down, but then you realize it's the wrong type. Instead of X-ray, it should have been like electron beam. Go back, change this, change the mega electron roll, come down and try entering it. Error Malfunction 54.
Then wait for the magnets in the machine to move. But an experienced operator, working with the THERAC every single day, encountering multiple error messages a shift, is in practice more than likely of making a change, like changing a beam from X-ray to electron, within 8 seconds. There was no code in place to check whether the prescribed input on the monitor
matched
what the machine
situation
was actually set up to do. The THERAC 25's reliance on software and not hardware interlocks like previous models also meant that input errors didn't have mechanical failsafes that wouldn't listen to the mistakes that ended up fatally irradiating people.
All because of like a couple of lines of code just basically not there to basically say, hey, is the platter in the is like the magnets in the exact same place where it should be? And just not having that check killed people. Like that is just the very idea that a couple of lines of code that are not properly written just ends people's lives is just, I mean, it shouldn't surprise me. Like a number of air accidents cases where it's like a bolt or like an improper repair goes and kills people. It's like, it shouldn't be surprising that a little bit of negligence where there should have been due diligence kills a lot of people. And in horrific ways. Radiation is a bad way to go.
With Malfunction 54 finally identified, AECL sent the first corrective action plan to the FDA, part of which were changes to the THERAC software to tell the machine where the cursor actually was. The CAP was revised twice by the FDA over the next few months, and THERAC 25s were back in use before the end of the year. 6 weeks later, a THERAC unit killed again.
But why?
On January 17th, 1987, Glenn Dodd, 65, walked into the Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital for treatment of a carcinoma.
The same hospital.
His disease was to be flooded with 86 rats.
No.
The THERAC instead bombarded the man's chest with 10,000. He died from acute radiation poisoning 3 months later.
They shut it down. Hospital shut it down.
The staff at Yakima reportedly stopped using the machine altogether after this accident.
People dying.
They were paranoid. They thought this had been fixed. This was safe. What did they miss? What was going on? Eventually, it was discovered that the THERAC 25 had another invisible software error. Inside the
hell is this?
Code was a so-called housekeeper task that would constantly check whether or not the machine's turntable was in the correct position, make adjustments if necessary, and then revert to zero. Anything other than a zero in the code, therefore, was an error, and the machine would not proceed with treatment.
That's good.
Again, good in theory. However, like your car's odometer, this code ticked up checks only until a certain value, in this case, 1 byte of memory, 256. After that, it would tick over to zero out of necessity.
Oh no.
If a technician entered an erroneous treatment at this precise moment, just an instant before the next check, the computer would read a zero.
No error.
No errors. And proceed. This is called arithmetic
Stack Overflow or something like that, yeah.
And it's what killed Glenn Dodd. In February 1987, the FDA again declared the THERAC 25 defective, recommended that all units be taken out of service until corrective action could be taken. Finally, the accident stopped.
Okay. What did they do?
After months of revisions, AECL told customers that the FDA had accepted a final corrective action plan. It included 23 software changes and 6 hardware safety features. The largest of which was a dose per pulse monitor affixed to the machine that would shut down dangerous doses even if all the software safety checks failed.
I think that would be the best case scenario, which is like, it doesn't matter what the software declares. If the actual hardware is outputting a certain power level of output, shut everything down. Doesn't matter. Figure it out later.
However, unsurprisingly, after high-profile and unprecedented accidents, the THERAC was no more. In 1988, AECL dissolved their medical division, and lawsuits from families were settled out of court. At the time of this recording, with a cursory search, I was unable to find any hospital actively using a THERAC 25. Even if they are, which isn't unlikely, the machines are probably under a different name or company.
Very old.
Even without any further incidents to point to today, no hospital wants to draw active comparison to disaster. Today, the THERAC 25 is more a staple of ethics and computer science class-required readings than it is of medicine, a unique case study of what can go wrong when new technology is trusted implicitly and when ethical decision-making malfunctions. AECL assumed that the software for the THERAC 25, written by a single unidentified hobbyist and imported from the older
and the fact that no one
THERAC
was there to read the code or even have and the weirdest thing for me is like the design interpretation, like the implementation of this system was just, we'll trust the software to do everything. There's no reason for hardware checks, which I think is stupid. It's like, you will need to have hardware checks in place regardless of what software demands and tells you. You have hardware redundancy in place just to basically say, is it safe? If it's not safe, shut it down. That's
20 model did not have residual software errors to be tested. It didn't consider how the machine was being used in practice, never envisioning something like Malfunction 54. The company repeatedly denied knowing of any accidents and believed that overdoses were impossible. It made proclamations like 5 orders of magnitude increases in
clearly
safety
that didn't do jack
were
shit.
physically impossible. Today, the FDA requires documentation on all software for new medical
That's good.
products, which the THERAC 25 didn't have, that can be investigated independently.
That's nice.
10 years after the deadliest software errors in history, reporter Barbara Wade Rose asked Bill Bird, the lawyer for the first THERAC victim, Katie Yarborough, to comment on the events. Quote, "The thing that amazes me is that the people who developed these machines are surely some of the most brilliant people in the world. This machine was unbelievably sophisticated, and yet nobody would have gotten hurt if somebody had just used common sense." Until next time.
In a world that's, and this is an incredible video, in a world that's very much technology driven, it's impressive how sometimes just an oversight can just happen from something that should have been so obviously stated. Like having a hardware check in a medical device outputting radiation is just common sense. It should have been implemented. But the fact, and it's often the thing, I've said, and there's a lot of people have already said it before. It's like, look, most safety rules and safety laws are written in blood because people don't really care about safety until people die. In the chemical industry or in like pharmaceutical industry or anywhere else, your rules and regulations are set to protect people because of what happened without those rules and regulations. So yeah, more often than not, safety is terrifying, especially in this case when the company denies it could ever happen. But yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you beautiful bastards in the next one. Peace. Take care. Nice.